Hi there, friends. Let me take you straight into the heat of the Sahel. Imagine it. A young captain, barely in his 30s, steps onto a podium draped with the red, green, and gold of Burkina Faso. Cameras flash. Families huddle around battered radios. And then he speaks words so outrageous that foreign journalists burst out laughing. We will plant 15 million banana trees. Bananas in the desert. Bananas in a land where even millet, the tough grain of survival, often fails. The reaction was instant. Parisian newspapers mocked him as delusional. Economists called it agricultural suicide. Aid agencies warned of wasted water, doomed harvests, crushed dreams. To the outside world, Ibrahim Traoré looked like a reckless gambler, betting his fragile nation's survival on a tropical fruit. But inside Burkina Faso, the words thundered differently. After generations of being told, you cannot resist the desert, you cannot feed yourselves, you cannot prosper without foreign aid, here was a leader declaring the unthinkable. Every tree is a soldier. 15 million soldiers to fight hunger, poverty, and humiliation. Mothers whispered to their children, maybe tomorrow will be sweeter. Youth began to imagine jobs in farming, trade, and food processing. Women, long shut out from cash crops, dreamed of banana cooperatives selling chips, flour, even baby food. For once, the future didn't taste like dust. It tasted like fruit. And so the question hangs in the hot Sahel air. Can millions of banana trees defy not just nature, but history itself? Can green leaves rise where only sand has ruled? Or will the desert swallow this dream before the first harvest? Stay with me, because what happened next will shake everything you thought you knew about Africa news. Ibrahim Traoré and the destiny of Burkina Faso. When Ibrahim Traoré seized power in late 2022, Burkina Faso was a nation on its knees. Jihadist attacks had displaced nearly 2 million people. Markets were thin with food. The capital, Ouagadougou, felt the weight of hunger, while the countryside sank into despair. Most leaders would have pleaded with the World Bank or begged foreign aid agencies for another bailout. Traoré did something else. He pointed to the barren savanna and declared war, not on people, but on the desert itself. His weapon of choice shocked everyone: the banana tree. It was not the cotton fields that French corporations had always prized, not the gold mines that foreign investors drained, but a humble fruit plant that outsiders said could never grow in the Sahel. On national television, Traoré's voice carried with raw defiance. Every seedling will be a soldier. Every tree a promise of sovereignty. For people living in the city, the words felt electric. In cramped apartments of Ouagadougou, families turned up the radios. Children repeated the number in awe: 15 million. In remote villages near Bobo-Dioulasso, farmers shook their heads, then smiled in disbelief. On community radio, a host in Bobo-Dioulasso summed up the new mood. For the first time, we are told not what we cannot do, but what we can. That one phrase rippled through markets and schools. Youth in Ouagadougou began posting online. If we can grow bananas, we can grow an economy. For women, the announcement struck deeper. In rural Burkina Faso, they often managed small gardens but were excluded from gold and cotton. Bananas offered something different. Cooperative groups of women began sketching plans: dried banana chips for local markets, banana flour for bakeries, baby food for clinics. This was not just food, it was dignity. And dignity was something foreign aid had never delivered. The symbolism of the banana began to spread like wildfire. Soldiers, once feared as patrols against jihadists, were seen unloading seedlings, digging trenches, carrying buckets of water. Schools converted into nurseries, where children watered banana shoots each morning before classes. Teachers taught citizenship through agriculture. Caring for this tree is as important as reading and writing. Planting days turned into festivals. Villagers gathered with drums and dances, blessing each fragile seedling as though it were a newborn child. Radios blasted a new song with a refrain that echoed everywhere: "Plant for freedom, plant for tomorrow." Still, Doubt haunted the air. The Sahel is merciless. Farmers knew the cruelty of winds, droughts, and hungry goats. Could bananas truly survive? Could the desert be resisted not with walls but with roots? International observers had their answer ready: no. But for Burkina Faso, the decision to plant was no longer about perfect odds. It was about reclaiming the right to dream. Traoré's gamble was never just about bananas. It was about sovereignty, about proving that a nation could choose boldness over dependence. So as the first seedlings went into the soil, the nation held its breath. In fields stretching from Ouagadougou to Kaya, from Dédougou to Fada and Gorma, millions of green leaves tried to rise against the odds. And with each seedling planted, the question grew louder, sharper, more haunting. Was this the birth of a revolution, or the beginning of a catastrophe? At first, the scene looked like a celebration. Across Burkina Faso, planting banana trees felt less like farming and more like a campaign of national renewal. Villages turned into planting grounds, classrooms became nurseries, and soldiers who once carried rifles now carried buckets of water. Farmers who had grown used to despair finally felt a flicker of control. Mothers told their children, "This tree is your tomorrow." It was a fragile hope, but it was hope nonetheless. Yet the Sahel is never silent. Within weeks, the desert struck back. Rows of seedlings withered under unrelenting heat. Their leaves curled brown, their trunks bent and brittle. Sudden storms drowned others, washing away tender roots. In some fields, termites chewed stems into paper. Goats wandered through unfenced plots, snapping trunks in half. What had looked like the beginning of abundance soon looked like a battlefield, littered with casualties. The photographs were devastating. Newspapers in Paris plastered front pages with images of shriveled groves. Headlines screamed, "Traoré's bananas collapse in the dust." Washington think tanks declared the project proof that the desert cannot be resisted. Aid agencies issued fresh warnings that Burkina Faso was wasting its scarce water on a doomed dream. A commentator on French television sneered, "The Sahel has no place for fantasies." Inside the country, the mood shifted sharply. Families who had danced during planting ceremonies now stood silent before dead fields. Children asked their parents why the trees of freedom had died. Farmers muttered, "Perhaps the foreigners were right." Despair returned, heavier than before, because hope once tasted is harder to lose. It was in this dark moment that Captain Ibrahim Traoré stepped forward. He traveled to the hardest-hit regions, where farmers stood among withered fields. Cameras followed as he bent down, pulled a brittle banana stem from the soil, and held it high. The plant was lifeless, the image of defeat, yet his words transformed the meaning. This one is gone, but another will stand. Sovereignty does not sprout in one season. It grows with persistence. The message spread like fire, broadcast on radios, replayed on television, whispered in marketplaces. His declaration reframed the disaster. Dead seedlings were no longer signs of failure. They were fallen soldiers in a larger war. The people were not losing. They were fighting the desert itself. And in a war, persistence mattered more than a single battle. For critics abroad, this looked like delusion. A European analyst mocked on air, "He is leading his people into a mirage." Economists warned of water shortages. Diplomats called the project reckless nationalism. But inside Burkina Faso, their words had the opposite effect. Every insult became fuel. Every doubt was proof that sovereignty frightened the powerful. One young man told a reporter, "If they laugh, it means we are doing something they fear." And so, the banana army did not collapse. It hardened. Farmers replanted. Youth brigades dug deeper trenches. Women carried buckets at dawn. Children once again watered seedlings before school. The motto shifted. If the desert strikes once, we strike back twice. The struggle itself became the victory. Beyond Burkina Faso's borders, reactions were mixed. In Mali and Niger, people watched with cautious fascination. Some whispered, "If Burkina Faso can resist the desert, maybe we can too." but their governments hesitated, fearing ridicule if they followed Traoré's path. Across the Sahel, the small nation had become a laboratory of defiance, an experiment watched by all. Meanwhile, the mockery from abroad only deepened. French agronomists scoffed that the desert would eat their dreams. World Bank officials issued cautious reports about unsustainable irrigation. Development experts on television described Burkina Faso as a nation gambling with hunger. It seemed the outside world was waiting eagerly for failure. But on the ground, ordinary voices pushed back. In a village near Bobo Dioulasso, a farmer named Issa stood by his surviving grove and told a journalist, "This tree is my bank. When it fruits, I will feed my children and sell at the market. It will not betray me like foreign companies have." His words echoed across the country. On community radio, his statement was repeated again and again. Bananas were not just plants. They were investments in dignity. The emotional crescendo of the moment was undeniable. Entire communities had enlisted in a new kind of war. Not a war of rifles and blood, but of roots and resilience. A war where children guarded saplings, soldiers dug trenches, and women organized cooperatives. It was as if the entire nation had mobilized for survival. Still, anxiety lingered like a shadow. Farmers knew the desert's cruelty. They had seen dreams buried in the soil before. The question gnawed at everyone. Could determination alone overcome nature? Could even the fiercest will keep millions of banana trees alive in land designed by drought? That question was no longer academic. It was personal. Each family, each village, each farmer was staking their dignity, their energy, their future on the survival of fragile green shoots. And in that uncertainty, Burkina Faso's fate trembled. Would the desert devour their dream, or would defiance itself become the nation's greatest harvest? The collapse of the first seedlings might have broken another nation, but in Burkina Faso, failure was transformed into a lesson. The state began to mobilize not just passion, but science. Agronomists from the National Research Institute stepped in, bringing banana varieties from East Africa bred for survival. Unlike the fragile Cavendish familiar in European supermarkets, these varieties had thicker skins, deeper roots, and shorter trunks. They were not designed for elegance, but for endurance. Training workshops multiplied. Farmers learned to dig circular pits, seed basins, that captured rainfall and funneled it directly to roots. Families piled mulch made of dry grasses, shredded stalks and leaves around trunks to trap moisture. Villages installed simple fences to protect against goats. Slowly, techniques sharpened resilience. Then came the technological leap. Local engineers worked with the army to set up solar-powered drip irrigation in pilot regions. Instead of flooding fields with scarce water, the system delivered drops straight to the roots. For the first time, people saw banana groves survive dry weeks without collapsing. Survival rates, once a devastating 20%, now soared past 60, even 70% in some areas. The difference was visible everywhere. Where families had once wept over fields of dust, now rows of broad green leaves rose. Children played under shade that had never existed before. Women planted beans and peanuts beneath the canopy, turning groves into living microclimates. Villages that had once measured time in hunger now measured it in harvests. But the impact was not only agricultural, it was political. For decades, Burkina Faso had been chained to cotton and gold, industries tied to foreign companies and volatile markets. Cotton prices swung on trading floors in London. Gold profits disappeared into the pockets of corporations. Ordinary people were left with crumbs. Bananas changed the equation. This was a crop rooted in villages, traded in local markets, and controlled by cooperatives. If export contracts failed, families could eat the fruit. If markets slowed, bananas could be dried and preserved. Unlike gold, bananas belonged to the people who grew them. Each bunch harvested was a declaration of sovereignty. Women felt this shift most profoundly. With cooperatives at the heart of the banana economy, They gained both income and authority. For the first time, women stood in village councils not as dependents, but as decision-makers. A cooperative leader named Awa declared on local radio, "Before we begged, now we sell, now we decide." Her words spread with the same force as Traoré's speeches. The social fabric began to transform. School children ate bananas in meal programs instead of waiting for imported grain. Livestock thrived on shredded banana trunks, producing more milk and eggs. Families who once scraped by on dust suddenly had surpluses to sell. Communities built wells, small clinics, even solar grids, not from aid, but from banana profits. And yet, the international reaction remained skeptical, even hostile. Economists in London declared, "Bananas are thirsty. They will drain the future dry." The World Bank warned of water collapse. Aid agencies said Burkina Faso was gambling with lives. But inside the country, these criticisms only hardened resolve. Every warning became proof that outsiders wanted failure. Every insult was fuel for defiance. Politically, Traoré's standing grew. To the people, he was no longer just a young soldier in uniform. He was the captain who had dared to say yes, where the world had said no. His banana army had become a metaphor for independence. Songs celebrated him not as a warlord, but as a planter of hope. Yet anxiety remained. Droughts still came. Winds still tore at fields. Farmers knew victory was fragile. Sovereignty was not a harvest won in one season. It was a war waged year after year. But now, for the first time, they believed they could fight. The result was a paradox. International elites saw recklessness. Burkinabe citizens saw resilience. To outsiders, bananas symbolized futility. To villagers, bananas had become shields and swords. And in that paradox lay a profound political question. If one leader could turn a tropical fruit into a weapon of sovereignty, what else could be reimagined? If a small, landlocked country could defy its desert, could it also defy the structures of dependency that had bound Africa for generations? The answer was not yet certain. But every green leaf rising against the Sahel sun carried the promise that nations, like trees, could root themselves in persistence and grow into freedom. The road ahead for Burkina Faso is not paved with certainty. It is carved through risk, resilience, and imagination. By the third year of the Banana Project, the fields no longer looked like fragile experiments. They looked like orchards, groves of green rising where dust once ruled. Villages that had been synonymous with hunger now hosted harvest festivals, children dancing with bunches of fruit, elders blessing trees as if they were grandchildren. But Traoré's vision was never just about food. The next phase is economic transformation. Women's cooperatives are scaling up from selling banana chips in markets to running small factories that produce flour, baby food, even livestock feed. Youth brigades once planting seedlings are now driving trucks across borders, carrying bananas into Mali, Niger, and Ghana. What began as survival is turning into trade. International buyers who once mocked the plan are now signing contracts. The first shipment to Dubai marked a turning point. Future deals with Europe are already under discussion. Branding bananas as born of the Sahel has given Burkina Faso a new identity. Not a land of crisis, but a land of resilience. Yet challenges remain. The desert will not surrender. Climate change promises harsher droughts and fiercer storms. Success will depend on scaling technology, solar drip irrigation, drought-resistant varieties, and stronger infrastructure. Without them, the dream could still wither. But with them, Burkina Faso could build a model of sovereignty that inspires an entire continent. And that is the real frontier. If one landlocked nation can feed itself, export with pride, and empower women through a single crop, what happens when dozens of African nations take similar steps? Could the continent turn from dependency to self-reliance? Could the Sahel, long a symbol of despair, become a green belt of defiance? The road ahead is uncertain, but in every village where banana groves now rise, people repeat a new mantra. The desert has teeth, but we have shields. And so the future of Burkina Faso will not be written in foreign reports. It will be written in the soil, leaf by leaf, harvest by harvest. From Washington to Brussels, from Paris to London, the story of Burkina Faso's bananas has become impossible to ignore. In the early days, Western analysts laughed at the project. They called it agricultural suicide, reckless populism, a soldier's fantasy. But now, with markets in Dubai buying Sahel-grown fruit and European buyers expressing interest, those same voices speak more cautiously. What was mocked as madness is now framed as a case study in resilience. For the United States, the story strikes an uncomfortable chord. Many older Americans still remember the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, when nature humbled even the richest country. Seeing a poor African nation fight back against the desert with persistence, science, and solidarity raises a troubling question. Why do we still view Africa only through the lens of dependency? What if the continent is writing a new chapter in sovereignty? One crop at a time. International corporations are nervous. For decades, Africa's agriculture was shaped by foreign contracts and aid dependency. Now, a landlocked country once dismissed as fragile is exporting fruit under its own brand. If Burkina Faso succeeds, others may follow. Mali, Niger, even drought-stricken Sudan could take inspiration. The precedent terrifies those who profit from African weakness. Yet for ordinary Americans watching Africa news, there is also inspiration. Ibrahim Traoré's gamble reminds them of pioneers who once turned the Great Plains into breadbaskets. The shock is real, but so is the admiration. And the question hangs in the air. Is this simply a Burkinabe miracle, or the opening act of an African revolution? Across the savanna of Burkina Faso, 15 million banana trees now stand where only dust once blew. What began as a gamble has become a movement. Women who once begged now earn and decide. Children who once knew only hunger now sing songs of the banana army. Villages that once waited for aid now build wells, schools, and clinics from their own harvests. A nation once mocked as fragile now exports hope, stamped on boxes that read, "Bananas of the Sahel." But the story is not finished. The desert has not surrendered, and climate change promises more battles ahead. Yet every drought, every storm, every critic has been met with persistence. And persistence, like the roots of the banana, runs deep. So here is the shocking question. If 15 million banana trees can turn dust into dignity, what could 150 million do across the African continent? What if the Sahel itself, long branded as barren, became the breadbasket of a sovereign Africa? This is more than agriculture. It is a challenge to the world order. It is a warning to those who profit from dependency. And it is a call to anyone who believes freedom can be planted, nurtured, and harvested. If this story shakes you, do not look away. Subscribe, stay with us, and be ready for the next chapter, because the revolution sprouting in Burkina Faso may soon spread across Africa. And the question will not be whether bananas can survive the desert, but whether the world can survive a continent that finally stands on its own.